Disorder and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone. Again, this is Mark Fisher, and this podcast is called Disorder. Disorder. You know what happens when you fail to enforce the law? You have disorder. What happens when you allow people to walk right out of jail after having just arrested them because you decide, you're not going to prosecute them. It's not really worth kind of teaching them a lesson to stay in jail even for 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours. Oh, no. It's just like a revolving door. Come on in, come on out, come on in, come on out. Or you don't want to arrest people for looting, for stealing, for organizing mass thievery of stores, of staying outside of stores and, like, for example, staying outside of a coffee shop like a Starbucks or something like that, and just hanging out in the street, and you're drunk and you're dazed and confused. So, what happens? Well, you have disorder. You have disorder and you have decay of society. Well, this podcast is going to discuss this and how this is affecting the United States of America. It's affecting the entire country, let's face it, but primarily affecting the blue cities and the blue states the most. So first up, eco warriors. What is an eco warrior? Well, an eco warrior is that person who they've decided to take on climate change and the environmental issues to the point where it becomes a religion. So rather than trying to find solutions, rather than using science to determine the best solutions to the environmental challenges of today, they instead try to engage in eco-terrorism or maybe just eco-harassment. You decide what this actually is. So in the New York Post podcast listeners, eco warriors who deflated SUV tires in New York City hit at least 3 other cities, which means, of course, that this is coordinated. So what is that? What are they doing? Here's what the article states. They're not tired out yet. The eco-warriors who deflated the tires of dozens of SUVs in the Big Apple have struck in at least 3 other U.S. cities and threatened to expand massively across the country. The tire extinguishers, which started in the UK, hence the spelling, Tyre, claimed late Wednesday to have so far hit more than 5,000 SUVs in at least 8 countries, with even more planned. The group said that in addition to the nearly 40 vehicles targeted late last month on the Upper East Side of New York City, at least 20 SUVs were hit in Chicago, another 20 in Scranton, PA, and 12 in the San Francisco area. It has openly called for help in Los Angeles, too. A serious wave of tire extinguisher actions sweeping the United States right now, the group bragged, calling on more activists to help put SUVs into the dustbin of history. We also support keying SUVs. Keying, right? So keying is when you get your car key and you scratch along the entire length of a vehicle, and thus making it necessary for the vehicle to be repainted and you needing body and repair work on your car. Cause unsightly damage to these death machines. So engaging their owners and sending a message that these vehicles will never be safe, it told prospective analysts. The eco group quipped that it has already left millions of gallons of SUV drivers boiled or pissed off. Obviously, that's what they're trying to say here. So there's also a flyer that's being sent out. It says, "Attention, your gas guzzler kills." And it's a flyer and it says, signed, the tire extinguishers. Volunteers are told to leave a letter on the targeted SUVs, telling drivers it's not you, it's your car. The group also shared a report in its native UK that asked, if I buy an SUV, will it be vandalized by climate protesters? Yes, it will, the tire extinguishers tweeted. We will make it impossible to own an SUV in the world's urban areas. Haha, I have to stop there. So the tire extinguishers tweeted, we will make it impossible to own an SUV in the world's urban areas. So the reason why this is important, ladies and gentlemen, is because these cowards would never go out to the rural areas or the suburban areas of the United States of America and try to take out air out of your tire or to try to poke a hole into your tire. Of course they wouldn't. Why wouldn't they? Because these are the people in the suburban and urban areas that have guns, right? They see you messing with their vehicle. Maybe they have, the Ring doorbell and other Ring cameras around their house. They see you in their driveway. You're perceived to be trying to steal their car because you're messing with their vehicle. That's all that I would see too, by the way. If I saw someone outside of my house and I saw them stooping over at my vehicle, I would just think they're trying to sneak up to break into my vehicle or sneak up to break into my house. And I would immediately retrieve a gun and give them a warning, right? Of course, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? It's like the normal thing. It's your property. But that's why these cowards, the tire extinguishers, won't even go to the rural and suburban areas. They're going just to the cities because in America's cities, which are primarily run by left-wing Democrat ideologues, you aren't allowed to have a gun in those cities, or it's very difficult to own a gun in those cities. And it's very difficult to use your gun in those cities to protect yourself because they have turned those cities and the blue leaders in those cities have turned the law-abiding citizens into the bad guys. So where's next? The article continues. Wherever you are, the group tweeted, telling supporters not to stop until it's impossible to own an SUV in the world's urban areas. An identified and unidentified spokesman for the UK group told Fox News Digital that it planned to expand massively across the US. That's why we're reading this article, ladies and gentlemen, because this is a new trend, right? It used to be, I don't like your choices in life, but they're your choices, right? With respect to what you buy. I have a friend who bought, they bought a Tesla, okay? I think a Tesla is a cool car. I do. I think it's really kind of neat. But there are too many unknowns to me about the Tesla vehicle, and one of them is the range of the vehicle. And the idea that if I got into my Tesla vehicle, for example, and I drove from Maryland to West Virginia because I was going to go to, let's say, a resort in West Virginia. I was going to go skiing, let's say, in West Virginia. Where exactly would I plug my vehicle in once I got to West Virginia? And could I even get there? And that's the problem, right? Those are issues. But that's a choice that my friend made. I chose not to make that choice. But because I chose not to make the choice of getting an electric vehicle, because I'm concerned about the range of electric vehicles, generally speaking, and the sheer amount of driving that I do, which I drive a lot in my real job as well, does that give me the right to go put a hole in the Tesla vehicle's, my friend's tire, to take the air out of their tire, to try to key the Tesla, to try to stop them from using it? Of course not. Of course it's not. So what's next? I mean, Chris, can you think of what's next that the groups can decide that they don't want you to use? Oh, I know. Let's just say you're a farmer and you have cows. Are they going to go out and start shooting your cows or poisoning your cows because the flatulence from cows causes climate change? Or how about if you are in a restaurant and you're having a ribeye steak in a really great steak restaurant, and these idiots come and decide to throw paint inside the restaurant so it ruins everybody's food and their experience and also makes it very difficult for the restaurant to stay open. That's who these people are. You see, there are no limits, ladies and gentlemen, to what a group like this can do to disrupt civil society. And that's why we're calling this podcast Disorder. Because everybody that I know probably looks at this tire extinguisher group and thinking, oh, well, that's just like a prank. Haha, isn't that, folks, these are not 14-year-old pranksters, okay? That's not what these are adults. These are grown adults who know better, and they've chosen to terrorize the civil societies in which they live, which, of course, if you want to call it civil society in blue cities, but they've decided to terrorize the people that live there by taking the air out of their tires. What if you have an emergency? You go out to your vehicle, you have no air in your tire, now what? That could be life and death, but it really misses the point. It's your vehicle. It's your choice. You paid for the SUV. You paid the taxes on the SUV. You also have to pay the very high gas prices currently because of the Biden administration in order to buy the SUV. And so there are no limits to this kind of eco-terrorism. I say this to you, ladies and gentlemen, because too often in America, we don't stop things in their tracks when we know that the direction is going to end very badly for our country. And this is one of those examples. And the question I have for you is this: when was the last time you heard a Democrat politician or the president of the United States saying, this is really, really bad that we have people going on private property and or abusing private property, and we need to stop it right now? The American people have a right to spend their money on the things they want to spend their money on, whatever that may be. That includes what they eat. That includes the kind of house they have. That includes the kind of vehicle they drive, and on and on and on. But we don't hear the Democrats talking about that. And I can tell you right now, this eco-warrior trend in the United States of America is going to end very badly for you lefties out there, because the first time you encounter someone who owns their own gun in their home, it's going to end very badly. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not encouraging violence. It's to the contrary. If you're on someone's private property and you're doing this at nighttime, which is what these eco warriors are doing, and they're on your private property at nighttime, you see them sneaking around, you see them messing with what do you think is going to happen? Of course, someone is going to pull out a gun. Of course, eventually someone's going to get shot and killed or badly injured. And then we're going to have the next conversation. Well, people shouldn't have guns. I would argue this is probably why people should have guns. One of the many reasons, namely that we have a Democrat Party that has decided to radicalize people through the public education system and through America's colleges and universities by teaching folks that there's only one way to be environmentally responsible, and that is their way. And if you don't follow their way, then you have the right for them to terrorize you and your family. I would argue that that is a really good reason for the Second Amendment. Really good reason. Because there will be no end in sight to these folks coming on your property and then deciding, well, you really don't have the right of private property. Isn't that what an SUV is? Isn't an SUV private property? Of course it's private property. Once they violate that, then they violate your property itself by coming into your house and by deciding what you can and can't do in your house. Oh, you don't have solar panels in your house. We're going to burn your house down. We're going to paint using spray paint all of your house saying, this person is a criminal because they don't have solar panels. That's where this is heading. And very few people are willing to talk about this because they're like, it's just a bunch of, young adults who are misguided, who are going out there and letting the air out of the tires. No, it's coordinated across the planet and primarily in Western democracies. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these idiots are being encouraged by the Marxists that are currently in power in China and the Marxists that are currently in power elsewhere in places like North Korea and Venezuela and Cuba, and of course, Russia. Putin, it's his fault. So next up, podcast listeners, to underscore the issue of disorder, we have in Pompano Beach, Florida, not the mayor, but the vice mayor. I guess the vice mayor is the number 2 mayor. So in Pompano Beach, Florida, I always want to see Pompano, but it's Pompano Beach. I know that. Florida, a police officer, pulls over the vice mayor of the town. Okay. And the vice mayor was speeding like way over the speed limit, a solid 20, 30 miles over the speed limit. So the police officer really, obviously, I would imagine, decided, look, that's just too dangerous. You can't drive 60 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour lane. You just can't. So this officer does nothing more than to pull over this individual. He has no idea who it is. How could he? He's too busy putting his lights on, following the person, turning, pulling her over. And then and only then, of course, when they start reading the tag in to the system, do they determine what the person's name is. Doesn't mean that he recognizes the name. I mean, if I were a police officer and I pulled over, the vice president of Coca-Cola, do you think I would know who that is? I don't know. All right. I wouldn't, because the law is supposed to be blind. All right. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter what position you hold in government, elected or otherwise, or a position you hold in the private sector. What matters is if you broke the law and you're driving in a way that's going to cause others harm, then the law applies to you equally. So Democrats are still struggling to distance themselves from the defund the police movement, but we all remember who was encouraging cities to slash funding. It was the Democrats, of course. Newly released footage reveals that one Florida Democrat, the vice mayor of Pompano Beach, Florida, was pulled over for excessive speeding. We have two clips on this. The first clip is the police officer approaching the car and saying to the vice mayor, hey, look, you were speeding. Here's what happened. I need your license and registration. And we have a second clip about how she decided to respond when he came back. Here's the first clip. Here it is.
Hands out the window for me. Hands out the window for me. Thank you. Put your hands back out the window for me. What's going on tonight? Nothing. The speed limit's 40 over here and it's only 30 on 9 Ave. I'm driving crazy down places. You're doing 45 down 9 Ave and you're doing 60 down here.
So she was going 60 in a 30 mile per hour lane, roadway. And the police officer observed her for quite some time doing this. Whether she saw the police officer or not, I don't know. It's possible, and she decided to continue. But let's face it. We all know in the real world, when you're driving 60 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour area, you're going to get pulled over. All right. It's going to happen. And that's probably a pretty big fine. So here's the thing. The police officer approaches her, the vice mayor. He doesn't know who she is, goes back to his car with her license and registration. And do you think he gave her a ticket? No. He comes back to her vehicle and he gives her a warning. All right. I mean, talk about luck. I'd feel very lucky if I drove 60 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour lane and the police officer came back and said, hey, I'm just going to give you a warning today. I don't know why. I'm just going to give you a warning. Well, that's what he did. So he gives her a warning, and no sooner than he does that, than she decides she's going to get the last word because she's the vice mayor of Pompano Beach, Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your modern Democrat Party. And again, another example of why there is disorder, because when you don't respect the police and you don't even respect the fact that the guy did you a massive favor by giving you a warning, what's next? It's no wonder we have these problems across America. We have that clip, the second clip, and here it is.
You need to slow down, okay? There's going to be a warning system saying I warned you tonight about speeding, okay? You hear what I said? You hear what I said? You got to slow down. I'm writing you a warning for speeding tonight, okay?
What's your name?
Officer Nabhan.
I didn't hear you.
Officer Nabhan.
Navan?
Nabhan.
Nav Ann.
Nav Hand.
All right. I'm Vice Mayor Beverly Perkins from the city of Pompano Beach.
Okay.
Y'all need to find something better to fucking do.
Okay.
So she said, you better find something better effing to do with your time. And I'm the vice mayor of Pompano Beach. And so the way that first started out, that second clip there, is he said, I'm going to give you a warning, and here it is. And do you understand? And she just sat there and looked at him with a blank face, like, giving him daggers for eyes, like a whole F you kind of look. And just like I'm in charge, I own you kind of look, the way she's looking at him. If you're a police officer, wouldn't you at that particular point in time want to go say, okay, ma'am, can you hold on for a few minutes? I was thinking about giving you a warning, because that's what I wrote up here in the ticket. It's just a warning. No points, no fine, no nothing, but I've changed my mind. That's what I would have done. I would have said, I'd change my mind, because what's the teaching lesson? The teaching lesson and the teaching moment for the Pompano Beach vice mayor is you can call a police officer these horrible names, and you can treat him like he's a piece of crap, like you own him because you're the vice mayor. I mean, that's the problem right now in the United States of America. It's a Democrat Party who first started out with canceling the police, then defunding the police, and now providing no respect for the very people that are keeping law and order. And then he's even doing you a favor by not giving you a ticket. I'm just curious. Chris, wouldn't you like it? Wouldn't you, if you were that cop, say, when she started giving you all the look and all the mouth and all that stuff, say, oh, well, wait a minute. It's not a warning anymore. Now, because it's 30 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour and you went 60 miles an hour, it's a $500 fine, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was a massive fine.
I would have just gone back and changed it in the computer.
Right, exactly. It's like, yes. And this is kind of a great example. And this is Florida, okay? So Florida is one of the obviously better states to live in. But obviously in Pompano Beach, you've got a bunch of libs who are running the town and the city of Pompano Beach. And these are the kinds of people that are there that run it, and you get what you elect, I'm just saying. But across America, we have this problem, and it is expanding. And so we started out that segment with eco warriors, people basically terrorizing your property. Pretty soon, they're going to be breaking into your property. And then you wonder why. Because they feel like there are no consequences to what they do, because the Pompano Beach vice mayor is basically saying, by definition, that there are no consequences to speeding, and there ought not be, certainly for her. And the police officer didn't do her a favor because police are bad. It's really what they think. So next up, podcast listeners, talk about disorder. 2 stories. These are important stories because it identifies a trend across America. What happens when you have disorder in America's cities? You have companies one by one that start closing their doors. Case in point, 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven recommends that all of their stores in the Los Angeles area, all of their stores, be closed due to recent deadly robberies. Now, folks, think about this. A 7-Eleven, by definition, tends to be in area, not always, but they tend to be located in areas that are poor or poorer. Why? Well, because the folks who are poor, and this is a fact, and it's a shame, right? Because part of this is education. They will oftentimes actually do their shopping at 7-Eleven. I mean, I'm talking about food shopping. And rather than go to the grocery store where the prices are clearly better, granted, we have inflation. Inflation is out of control. We all know that. But rather going to the place where you can get the best prices. So many people in the United States, they shop at 7-Eleven. And why? Because 7-Eleven is oftentimes the closest store for them to go to where they live. That's 7-Eleven's kind of mantra. They put stores, thousands and thousands and thousands of stores across the country. I don't know how many stores they have exactly, but it's many, many thousands. and they put them as close to you as possible so it's convenient. That's why they call it a convenience store. Okay? That is 7-Eleven's thing. They have recommended not that one, not that two, but that all of the stores in Los Angeles be closed due to recent deadly robberies. So in Tokyo, this article starts out, this is the Gateway Pundit. In Tokyo, you can check in your bags for your flights at some 7-Elevens. Interesting. In Hong Kong, you can recharge your Octopus card that allows you to purchase almost anything and ride on the subway, ferries, and buses across the city. At all 7-Elevens, you can purchase drinks and snacks while you travel. But unfortunately, these stores won't be open for a second night in the area around Los Angeles, the Daily Caller reports. The 7-Eleven corporate leaders recommended Tuesday of this week that all of its Los Angeles County stores and greater Los Angeles area stores be closed for a second night in a row to allow police to investigate a series of deadly robberies. So why is that important? Well, because naturally, if you own a 7-Eleven or if you're working at a 7-Eleven and you're being targeted, well, you might not want to work there very much longer. So 7-Eleven's trying to protect its investment and protect its employees. And they have a picture of this guy. It's a black guy with a hoodie. And it says, if you have any information on this particular information, please call, the Los Angeles County Police Department or the Los Angeles Police Department. Folks, this is an example of defund the police. This is an example of what happens. You have disorder. And when you have disorder, you have the businesses that are in the area where people who can least afford to have businesses close, they end up closing. And then what happens? You have even more poverty because now all of those jobs are gone. Opportunity shrinks. You have less places to go to buy things. And so it's also in the Daily Caller, as I said, by all means, read this article. And that's not the only thing that's happened. Starbucks is closing 16 U.S. stores because of repeated safety issues. Now, we started out this segment by saying 7-Eleven, which does what? They cater to people who tend to be poorer because they tend to be located in poor neighborhoods. That's not to say I don't go to 7-Eleven. My daughter, for example, loves Slurpees. Who doesn't? Especially the Coke Slurpee. Nothing better than that, a Coke Slurpee. Or if you are in a hurry and you happen to pass 7-Eleven, naturally you want to buy a bottle of water or something real quick, that's where you go. I get it. But nonetheless, 7-Eleven has a tendency of catering to the demographic that tends to be less well off, okay? That's why we're also giving you an example of Starbucks, because Starbucks is the complete opposite of 7-Eleven, where they tend to cater to people who are well off or better off. And so this is happening across all business segments. So now we have Starbucks closing 16 stores because of repeated safety issues. Starbucks is closing 16 stores around the country because of safety issues, including drug use and other disruptive behaviors that threaten staff. The coffee giant is closing 6 stores in its hometown of Seattle, 6 in Los Angeles, 2 in Portland, Oregon, and 1 each in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. Starbucks said employees at those stores will be given the opportunity to transfer to other stores. Starbucks said Tuesday the closures are part of a larger effort to respond to staff concerns and make sure stores are safe and welcoming. So I know one of these stores, and I can speak to it, in Washington, D.C., Union Station. One of the most beautiful train stations in the United States of America. It's beautiful. It's in Washington, D.C. Stunning, stunning train station. Architectural masterpiece. You get out of your Amtrak train and you walk up, the staircase, and you have what's basically a shopping mall. But the mayor of Washington, D.C. has decided that it's okay for the drug users, the dangerous, many of whom are very dangerous, and everyone else to just like hang out in Union Station. So you get accosted nonstop while you're there. Businesses have closed inside of Union Station, and now Starbucks has closed. Who in their right mind, when they take a train, because you're traveling, let's say, between Washington, D.C. and New York, or Washington and Philly, who in their right mind wouldn't say, hey, I've got an extra 5 minutes. I'm going to stop at Starbucks and get some coffee because I'm going to go on the train. And let's face it, the coffee on the train is awful. So, why wouldn't you stop at Starbucks and get some coffee? You can't now. It's not there. It's closed. So I'm speaking to the location that I know because I've been to Union Station many times. And this is an example of disorder, of what happens in American cities. What happens in America's cities when you have blue mayors, and these mayors don't really care about keeping order and keeping these dangerous people away from you. I mean, these are people that just want to destroy our economy, or do they not, Chris, do they even understand what they're doing? The mayors, I mean, do they really understand? I mean, I don't think they do. And in front of one Starbucks, by the way, there's a picture. It says, we were very pleased to have Bernie Sanders visit our store location last Saturday, because Bernie Sanders stopped at the South Burlington, Vermont Starbucks because he wants to unionize Starbucks. Okay, so think about this. Starbucks is closing stores, like one of the most successful chains across America, who's expanding, finds it necessary to contract in the places that you'd want them to expand in the most, like in America's cities. And then Bernie Sanders is like, well, that's not good enough. We want you to unionize. Starbucks, yeah, you want us to unionize? We'll just shut the stores down. Because after all, we're already having problems with vagrants and people ripping us off and drug addicts and just pure decay of the city around us. So we've decided, we're just going to close. Why wouldn't we? And that's what disorder does. That's what Democrat leadership does. And so next up, podcast listeners, the thing that makes disorder worse is the inflation tax. So get this. In the Wall Street Journal, the editorial board wrote an editorial titled "The Inflation Tax on Workers." The article reads as follows. Well, that was ugly. Inflation in June roared to its highest mark to date this year, rising 1.3% for the month and 9.1% over 12 months. This means greater declines in real wages and more Federal Reserve tightening that is likely to hit asset prices. No wonder Americans are in a sour mood. The price increases were broad-based, as the Bureau of Labor Statistics put it, especially for food and energy. I'm pretty sure y'all have seen that. The price index for food at home rose 1% for the month, the 6th month in a row that had 1% or more inflation, and 12.2% for the past year. So for the past year in the United States of America, food now costs 12.2% more today than it did 1 year ago. Energy prices rose 7.5% in the month. That's 1 month, 7.5%, 1 month. So the article continues, and I'm not going to find it necessary to read the rest of the article because inflation is a tax. Inflation is the result of disorder, and disorder occurs when you have a government that doesn't understand how inflation causes even more disorder. So I'd like to explain this. We already have a country that's divided, right? We're divided politically. We have eco-warriors who are deciding to attack your private property. We have people who are trying to turn your child into a transgender in public school and then not telling you that they're trying to counsel your child to become a transgender in school. I mean, this is all happening. So we have the cultural wars happening, and people are already divided. And then in addition to that, we have the inflation tax. If you look throughout history, world history, there is nothing that causes a society to fail more than economic turmoil. And inflation is just the recipe. So disorder is going to just begin. And I want to make this perfectly clear to my friends out there on the left and right. I do not support disorder, okay? That's not where I'm going with this. It's the opposite. I am warning you. It's the opposite. I'm warning you instead that disorder is about to come, because you cannot have people losing their standard of living, finding it necessary to spend more and more just to keep even, spending their savings, not getting raises, losing property, losing their standard of living, and then without having people starting to riot, without having people going in and doing mass thievery, look, folks, this has happened throughout world history. And in the United States of America, I think we primarily have a population that is not very tolerant of hard times. Sorry, we call this show Mark and the Millennials, but a lot of millennials have never experienced hard times. The generations that have followed the millennials, even worse. And so what happens when you have difficult times and you can no longer afford the things that you could once afford? For example, you were used to going on vacation twice a year and hopping on a plane. Now you cannot do that. You cannot go on vacation twice a year. You can only go on vacation once a year, and not on a plane to go somewhere. Instead, you have to drive to the place. Okay, that's the high class problem. Then there's the other problem, which is you were able to feed your family, and now you cannot. You were able to buy, groceries that were well balanced, and your family was well fed, and now you're buying more and more carbs. Or you were always living hand to mouth, and now you can't survive at all. Why wouldn't you think, podcast listeners, that there wouldn't be disorder? Why wouldn't you think that people wouldn't start rioting or, start attacking private property, start stealing things? Why wouldn't thievery increase? That is the point that I'm making. The Democrat Party, the party that has defunded the police, the party that has disrespected the police, the party that continues to say that police are the problem, have created an economic situation that is so dangerous that when people, because no longer if, when people begin to realize how bad the economy actually is affecting them, they're going to think, well, the Democrats said it's okay to steal because they've defunded the police, so let's just create bedlam and do that. And folks, this is how societies and civilizations are brought down. It is. It's exactly how societies, and that's why I found it necessary to talk about this inflation tax, because it is a political party that has caused this tax called inflation. And it's the Democrat Party. They've caused it primarily in energy prices, which of course, first and foremost affects food. And they've caused scarcity across our economy. Case in point, the baby formula shortage? Well, also in the Wall Street Journal, do you realize it's still occurring? It's still continuing? So there's a baby formula shortage, ladies and gentlemen. The shortage is actually deepening. It's worsening. And the replenishment efforts of baby formula have been insufficient. So there's a picture in the Wall Street Journal of a cabinet in a grocery store full of baby formula, yet it's all locked up. In other words, people have been stealing the baby formula, and so the stores have found it necessary to put it under lock and key. That's the ultimate in disorder. That's what happens when Democrats are in charge. You don't have sufficient supply for the demand. You have inflation. And then with baby formula, it's just simply the fact that the Democrats didn't even see this crisis coming, shut down some of the formula manufacturers, and, because the big companies are really bad. And now you have people in the cities ripping off the grocery stores with baby formula. So they have to put it under lock and key. Can you imagine going into your grocery store, This is coming soon, brought to you by the Democrats. Going into the grocery store and going down the bread aisle and all the bread is in locks. It's under locks and keys behind, glass cages or just cages, like metal cages, and there's a lock on it. You can't put your hand through the cage. You have to push a button, and someone that works there at the grocery store has to come over and unlock it for you and scan your credit card or what have you before they even will give you the bread. That's where we're going with this. So the U.S. stores are still struggling to stock baby formula despite months-long effort by manufacturers and the Biden administration to boost supplies. Availability of powdered formula products in U.S. stores earlier this month dropped to the lowest level so far this year, with about 30% of the products out of stock for the week. 30% out. While availability improved slightly last week, out-of-stock levels remain higher than in recent months, and shortages remain acute in states like Alaska, Utah, and Wyoming, the IRA data showed. Red states. At the same time, consumers are finding fewer choices of brands, sizes, or formats of formula on grocery store shelves. So this is why I actually have to ask the question. It's my understanding that the left doesn't like baby formula because of climate change. Like some of the baby formula they don't like because it's milk-based, I believe. And so I have to wonder if maybe the reason some of those brands have been attacked over time by the Biden administration and there are limited supplies is because they're trying to shut down certain kinds of baby formula that don't meet their climate agenda. Now, I don't know this for sure, but it's certainly worth asking the question. And so in the Wall Street Journal comments section about inflation and baby formula and the disorder situation across America, we have some comments in here, and it's really worth reading some of these. Here's one from William Kramer. I just randomly chose this. It's not even marked off. It says, let's see. Stop the oil pipeline, reduce drilling on public lands, and then add trillions of dollars to the economy, and nobody saw inflation coming? Either DC did it on purpose, or DC is really stupid. Or I'm just really smart, but I don't think so. Now, just randomly chose that article. You should see it, one after another. Another, Justin Nichols. I'm heading out for a taco with a few of my Hispanic friends. It's diverse taco, and that's making fun of Joe Biden, of course, because Joe Biden, as you might suspect, made a really stupid comment the other day at one of her speeches where she called them taco something, didn't she? It's like she used the term taco to refer to Hispanics. I mean, imagine a Republican doing that, and of course the media is completely quiet, other than maybe Fox News, but CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, etc. Nothing. No comments. So we have to understand something. When you have inflation at the level that we have, and this is really the takeaway, and you have a shortage at the same time of certain essential products like baby formula, you are going to have massive disorder. You're going to have more stores like 7-Eleven and Starbucks closing, and many more stores from many other chains closing. I'll just use those two as examples. And then you're going to have more extremism. And you're going to have more people pitted against one another. And you're going to have civil disorder, which results in the fall of a society and the fall of a civilization, which we do not want. Okay? I don't want it and you don't want it, which is why it's so important that we elect people this November who actually understand how an economy works and understand that we live in a free country and you get to decide what kind of SUV you drive and what kind of food you feed your child and what kind of food you feed yourself, what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of house you live in, what kind of car you get to drive, period. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. And in the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire, we have something about Kamala Harris. So typically, the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire would be about Joe Biden, but there were so many dumpster fires this week. We have like years of dumpster fires to follow up on. So we decided to fill it in with Kamala, the vice president, because let's face it, she could very well be president really soon. And just when you think you would escape the dumpster fire of Biden, well, Kamala steps up. So in the Daily Caller, Kamala Harris says, you need to get to go, and you need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work. So Vice President Kamala Harris seemed to fumble her words yesterday during a speech at the American Rescue Plan Workforce Development Summit, which of course is a government agency that was created by your tax dollars. Harris told the crowd that together we are expanding access to transportation. She then suggested that transportation seems like maybe a small issue, but it's a big issue. You need to get to go, blah, blah, blah. Well, this shows you how stupid she is. We have the tweet. Reading it wouldn't do it justice. You have to hear it to believe it. Folks, we have it, and here it is.
Together, we are expanding access to transportation. Seems like maybe it's a small issue, it's a big issue. You need to get to go and need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work and get home.
It's like that. I wouldn't want this person to even teach my children in K to 12. How is it that she's the vice president of the United States? I mean, how is it that we don't have one dumpster fire as president, but we have two? So when the top dumpster fire goes, you have a backup dumpster fire. I mean, these people are just stupid. They're just incredibly dumb. They cannot articulate. And they said Donald Trump couldn't articulate anything. I mean, how is it that these two are any better? So the Daily Caller continues. Before she started her speech, Harris touched on the Consumer Price Index report released last Wednesday. Quote, we passed a tax cut to give working families up to $8,000 a year, which means giving folks more room in their budgets to buy food, medication, and school supplies for their children, she said. President Joe Biden and I are always fighting to make sure that working families get ahead and stay ahead. The only problem is American families have lost the equivalent of almost $3,400 in annual income since Biden took office, the Heritage Foundation said. Well, folks, here's the other takeaway. The so-called $8,000 a year that Kamala Harris says that the Biden administration gave to working families, the $8,000 that she's talking about are in the form of taxpayer tax credits. So hear me out on this. You pay taxes. I'm sure you do if you're listening to Mark and the Millennials. But for those who don't pay taxes, that is to say, many people who are here illegally, and for those who are the working poor, the Biden administration is giving them money. Okay, they are receiving checks. But that it's a lie to say that a tax cut was given to working families. A tax cut was not given to working families by the Biden administration because Democrats don't believe in cutting taxes. They never cut taxes. Democrats believe in increasing taxes. And then once the government has that additional money, the Democrats take that additional money and give it to their base of supporters. So that's not a tax cut to their base of supporters. It is a giveaway by government, which steals from one group and gives to another. Only problem is that the group that the Democrats are giving to, the group that they're giving to, is actually realizing that the money they're receiving is worth less and less because of inflation. So then we have this vicious circle that just causes government to spin out of control and taxes to spin out of control. And that's Democrat economics, of course, 101. It's one of the reasons why we're going to have more and more disorder. But I want to play this for you again, just because I have to end with this, the podcast, with Kamala Harris saying this again. Imagine if you're in the audience and you're looking for hope. What's going to help us bring inflation down? What's going to help to bring our country back into balance? What's going to bring us together? Who has an answer to the economic crises that we're experiencing and the global disorder? Who has it? Kamala Harris has it. And let's play the clip one more time, Chris. Here it is.
Together, we are expanding access to transportation. Seems like maybe it's a small issue, it's a big issue. You need to get to go and need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work and get home.
You need to get to go. It's not a small issue. It's a big issue. I mean, it's like kindergarten. I mean, really? Unbelievable. And that's the daily Biden dumpster fire. It's Kamala's turn. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Truth Social, Getter, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.